get started?
Because you're going to be gone.
So super awesome. So it's absolutely wonderful to have each and every one of you here. I truly appreciate that. Your presence here is really serving that mission and purpose where we are here about integrating community, being a part of the community, and really being a service and a resource to the community. So great, thank you very much for being here. And I did want to start off very curious by a show of hands. How many of you have been here in Palm Coast long enough to see kind of changes happen to the city? Yeah? Fair to say?
1 year is long enough.
Fair enough to say, right? Even little Rowan here has seen changes happening in Palm Coast. So seen growth happen in Palm Coast, yes? So fair enough to say, right? So absolutely. So we've been here since 2021, and in that time we started off as not parents. We've then transitioned to being parents, and in that process, it's really one of those things that you learn what you didn't know when you need to know it. So we were planning on going a home birth route, and in that process, part of the kind of risk assessment, risk questionnaire is kind of, is there a hospital within 30 minutes from you? Well, we were like, psh, let's move on from that question, because got that. We live 5 minutes away from one hospital. This was before the new Advent Health Hospital was being built on Palm Coast Parkway, but we're like, we got another one 15 minutes away. We're good. Couple days, weeks down the road, did we realize that, yes, we are close by to two hospitals, but there is not a single labor and delivery unit in the entire county. So just to get started in that process, there is nothing as far as resources here locally. OBGYN, a challenge. Prenatal care, a challenge. Labor and delivery, go north, go south. Nothing locally. And then once we actually have the little ones our side, talking about pediatric care, same thing. Go north, go south. Welcome in. Feel free to filter in. Go north or south, and parents are oftentimes traveling either to either Daytona to St. Augustine. I have a lot of families that I've connected with that are traveling an hour one way just for a pediatric visit or a specialist visit or things like that to Jacksonville. Yeah. So there is a huge lack and need in the area for care during pregnancy, surrounding pregnancy, postpartum, and in that early phase of life. So that's really, our eyes were really lit up when we went through that journey, and it's something that we really wouldn't have known about had we not gone through that journey. So that's really what's inspired my wife and I to, we are actually in the process, she's in the process of pursuing one advanced pediatric certification through the ICPA, which is the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association. And I just recently completed a different certification through what's called the Pediatric Experience, which is much more tailored to advanced neurological challenging cases that tackle things from anywhere from ADHD, anxiety, seizures, autism, allergies, all these sorts of things, all from a focus on what is going on internally in these kiddos, what's going on with the nervous system, what is out of whack, if you want to so put it that way, and how can we help support them during that important phase, because in that phase of their life, they're not stagnant. They're doing the most amount of growth that they're ever going to experience in their lifetime. So when there's a challenge, an obstacle, an obstruction to either a communication pathway or to the way that their body is functioning, that then gets stacked and gets amplified as they meet that next motor milestone, that next growth spurt, et cetera, et cetera. So that just gets amplified, compounded, and we build off from there. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is really what is what we call the perfect storm, which is really a combination, a complex presentation of multiple things and factors that are really stressors that hinder, dampen, or suppress the proper and optimal development of that child's nervous system, and why and how that's so important. So the nervous system dysregulation, how that impacts your child's health. Really briefly, again, this is our why. We just kind of jumped into that, about we really discovered what we didn't know as we went through it as new parents. So when my daughter was born, we had a couple of challenges. She had some complications. I mentioned that we were trying for a home birth. We ended up, delivering in Flagler again, traveling up to St. Augustine for that. But during the birth process, she had what was called a shoulder dystocia, which is where she did not come out as fluidly or cleanly as you would expect or would want to see. Shoulder got stuck behind the pubic bone for a brief period. She came out with very low tone. That was a big concern. We had to immediately get her some attention. She was very blue. She was also, again, very low tone. They should still have some sort of motor control. She was very flaccid in that immediate phase. So very important to have that support and care, and we're very grateful that we were able to receive that there. But as that went on for the next couple of weeks and months, we realized that now we're having challenges with latching. She's having trouble eating. And so we were just facing a lot of these challenges that since we've gone through the certifications that we've gone through, I can't tell you how many times that we've faced that scenario where we learned something and we're like, man, if only we knew what we know now, then. And so that's something that's hugely valuable, hugely rewarding, and something that we're now able to pass off that experience and that knowledge to the community in this area. Because as I mentioned earlier about the growth that is happening in Palm Coast, is when we first moved down here, it was very well known to be a retirement community. It was actually rated that year #1 place to retire in America. Awesome. Love it. But one of the changes that is happening is that there are more and more new families, us being one part of that, right? And so in order to really grow, to see Palm Coast thrive, nourish, Flagler County thrive, and really nourish the community, we have to have these resources available for these families. So that's really our why, what's really propelled us to pursue what we're pursuing, to help these little ones grow healthier, more comfortably, and more connected starting from day one. Because again, looking back on photos of her early on, you can see tension, you can see distortion, and yes, most every chiropractor is trained in some aspect to work with kiddos, but there's something to say to be able to kind of dive in deeper and really specialize into that. So again, we're a pediatric practice, so y'all don't feel like you have to be, if there's noise, if you need to go up, get a drink from Mr. Mike over here, anything like that, we get more nervous when things are silent, as you all know who are parents. So feel free to just be comfortable, make yourself at home and all that. So again, husband and wife team behind New Wave Chiropractic. Just briefly sharing a little bit about kind of our background, who we are, where we come from. My wife and I have actually traveled internationally, 3 separate locations to India, El Salvador, and Brazil, all in service through chiropractic to humanity, right? Joining groups of chiropractors to really just be of service, again, spreading the light, helping people. Lots of tremendous stories that we won't really get into today, except for I do always like to share this top right-hand corner, this little gentleman. This was in a major city. I had actually worked with him the day prior. This was in a special needs school in India, in Ahmedabad. We had met with him in a very rural area of India the day prior. When I say very rural, very distant from where we were here. It was very hot, we were exhausted, so I actually took a lot of time with this little kid. He had just severe locked into his body cerebral palsy type of presentation, working with him for quite some time, to where the next day they weren't expected to be there. The mom said that she got the uncle to take him on a bus in a series of transportation to find us, because they had read about us on the newspaper of where we were going to be next. She arrived that day and said that night he had sat up on his own for the first time in his life and was able to feed himself for the first time in his life. And so they left shortly after working with them that day, but I just had to run out of the room. Wait, can we take this photo? Because I needed to capture that moment, because it was just such an impactful and empowering moment and experience. So absolutely love that one. But again, we have some other trips there in El Salvador and Brazil. So what are the commonalities that we all have in parents? I have a mentor that we used to frequently say, right, as parents, but really as human beings, we all have more in common than we are different. And as parents, so much so, right? As parents, we all want very similar things for our kiddos, and the foundation of that is happy, healthy, but just calm, able to learn, eager to learn, able to perform in whatever it is that they love to do. Really doesn't matter what they love to do, but just be that awesome human being, that thriving human being that we want them to be, right? So these are a couple of examples. I'm sure you can think of some more of what it is that you want for your kiddos. But again, these are things that we all want for our kiddos. So I wanted to share little Miss Aurelia's story here. So Aurelia, look at this is her holding up a gold medal for jiu-jitsu at the World League here in Florida. She is 4 years old. She started seeing us for more behavioral challenges. She had a very difficult time with sensory processing. She was very easily overwhelmed by things, even things going on in her body, not just externally. She would very frequently talk and really complain with a very severe degree of urgency that you could tell from her. She would refer to it as, "My toes are annoying." It's like the sensation within her body was so bothersome, so loud, that anything external just gets amplified on top of that. So she struggled with communication, emotions, behavior, and since then, her mom notes that she's much calmer. She's just better able to perform overall in life. So she's really integrated a lot of these growth experiences. So she's 4 now, and she's just doing fantastic while under care. And her mom definitely notices a difference. And then, yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Miles here, he was also challenging. He had a challenging birth. He is about 9 weeks old in this picture. His mom was also planning for a home birth. She ended up transferring to the hospital and had a series of complications in the hospital as well. In her own terms, she had what she considered a traumatic birth, challenging labored birth and delivery. And Miles came out also with a very high degree of tension, had trouble latching, had trouble eating. Even when he would get a good feed, he would just cry for hours on end. He was what you would term colicky, colicky baby, right? And really, one thing that I find fascinating is that there is no specific pathology or really thing to the term colicky. Like, we hear that term colicky baby, and before we had Rowan and all that, right? It's like you think that, oh, it's a specific thing, maybe the intestines. It's literally just a definition that gets applied to them if they're crying more than 3 hours consecutively or throughout the day. There's no rhyme, there's no solution in terms of the medical term. It's just, parents are often told, don't worry, they'll grow out of it. It's just a phase. And like I mentioned earlier, they oftentimes don't grow out of X condition, they grow into something else as these stages become amplified and more complicated. So Mr. Miles had that exact scenario, difficulty with just chronic tension, tightness, irritability, to where that was then adding a huge degree of stress on mom. She could not sleep. Dad also very stressed. They're new to the whole process of being parents as well. And kind of the hardest thing of it all is that mom said that, she just felt like she had a difficult time connecting with, I don't necessarily, she felt like she didn't know her child to the degree that she wanted to, because all she experienced was the stress, the angst, the tension, the struggle. She knew that there was more, but she didn't know how to get there. And so that is kind of really one of those things that really fuels us, that motivates us and inspires us to, you're not just changing an individual, you're not changing a child's life, you're changing a family's life, and by doing so you change the community as a whole, right? So we actually did have a very brief video that she actually made of Mr. Miles. But the cool thing about him is that now he's doing exceptionally well. He's thriving. He's eating well. He's just a much overall happier baby, to where dad even notices the change. Dads are oftentimes a little bit more like, oh, what's going on? What is this really? So this is a video that mom made, but really it just shows that now dad's to the point where he's like, hey, like, when's the last time Oz has been to the chiropractor? Because like, hey, like he's getting a little bit like fussy. Let's just make sure that things are well, right? Things are well and properly connected. So this just shows that a chiropractic visit at that time, at that age especially, super gentle, super loving, and it's just, again, just full of connection. It looks like she's just loving up the baby, but we're checking, making sure that he's well integrated, well coordinated all throughout. So that's Miss Anna hard at work over there with Mr. Miles. But super cool. So we'll keep going there. Boom. Mr. Miles' story. So yeah, it's super awesome to hear that he's doing great. So let's get back to it. So the perfect storm, what is that? Right? That's a totally fair question. And really, it's this, a cascade of both physical, chemical, and emotional stressors that cause neurological challenges, dysfunctions, and delays. We're going to dive into really what each of those means, how they present themselves. So when we talk about stressors, especially to kiddos that early on, oftentimes dads are like, what do you mean he's stressed? He does not know what a bill is. He does not know what a due date or a deadline is, what a 9 to 5 is. What can he be stressed about? But really, it's a lot about what we talked about earlier and briefly, things that happen early, often, and then sequentially, that are these challenges and stressors. And oftentimes, it starts even before the birth process. So, as I mentioned, the perfect storm is a combination of physical, chemical, and emotional cascades. So, what was pregnancy like for mom? We can even go before then. What was the process of conception like for mom? Yeah? If we're struggling to conceive, we generate that excitement when we get that line, that double line, right? And then there's a loss. Something happens. Or there's anxiety month after month of, is this going to be the month? Is this going to be the month? Why isn't it happening? What's wrong with me? What's wrong? What should I be doing? Right? There's so much fear and anxiety that plays into all of this early on. And I wish that it, just kind of stopped at conception. But really, once you're pregnant, there's a whole nother layer of fear and anxiety that is my baby okay? Are we able to go? Are we going to be able to get to that point of greeting little one, right? And then that's just in and of itself. But then depending on, the amount of support that you have, that gets amplified, or fear gets brought on, tests, procedures, all these sorts of stuff, right? Not that they're wrong, but it just amplifies the stressors emotionally and mentally on mom. And we know that that is the direct line, cord, and communication literally tethered to baby. It's more than nutrients. We're passing hormones. There's that neurological connection as well, right? So there's a very high degree of importance during that phase where these stressors start very, very early on, and earlier than a lot of people really realize. So that is just that emotional component. Really, they can really be broken down into what's out there, the 3 T's. So thoughts, traumas, toxins is an easy way to kind of identify those, right? So thoughts being that mental, emotional challenge or stressors. Physically, talking about birth trauma. The birth process, very, very challenging for baby and mom. Lots of complications. I mentioned one with the shoulder dystocia with my little one, Rowan, right? But there's lots of different things that can go into the physical trauma, whether we're talking about forceps, vacuum extraction. We're really talking about a great degree of axial pull when we're trying to help pull and propel a baby out. It's a common thing that, everybody has that uncle that we're concerned about, right? That when you hand the baby over, we always say, what? Support the what? Support the head, support the neck, right? But really, if you watch a birth process video, we're seeing that not only are we kind of not supporting, we're using the head and neck to pull. Then we have to add a degree of torque or rotation to get one shoulder out, counter torque to get the other shoulder out. You got to think, how delicate are those structures, right? If that uncle were to hand that baby back to you by the head and neck and say, here's your baby, thanks for letting me hold it, Thanksgiving, Christmas, holiday times will be a little bit different. Different conversations going on, right? But really, that's what's happening even on the best of outcomes and the best of scenarios during that birth process. Even cesarean, we're finding that cesarean has a lot of challenges on the baby. It's a very small incision that's made, so same thing. Pull, torque, counter torque. Again, amplify that, vacuum, forceps, all these sorts of stuff, and medications that are oftentimes used during delivery as well. And again, it's not to demonize at all. It's not to talk down or bad upon. It's just we have to have a conversation of what's really going on so we can better understand what's going on when we're talking about all these chronic health challenges that our kiddos are facing, locally and nationwide. So love Palm Coast. It's been very eye-opening since I've gotten my certification in neurology, pediatric neurology, is how many resources there are. For such a small town, we have a high degree number of resources for kiddos and families with special needs, with disabilities. So very high dense population in this area. So it's something that we're facing nationwide and locally. And then again, talking about the toxins, early and often use of antibiotics, medications. If kiddos are having ear infections, we'll just put them on a round of antibiotics. Oftentimes those are kind of more of a viral thing, so antibiotics aren't really playing into the ear infection component, but that's just kind of the, if this, then that, here we go, right? The kind of algorithm. So going back to the number of stressors, how early and how often we face, we kind of use that analogy of that gas pedal, brake pedal, because that's really what's going on when we're talking about the brain-body connection, the nervous system, specifically the side of the nervous system called the autonomic nervous system, which is composed of two different portions. Oftentimes we know of it more as fight or flight. That's the sympathetic. We kind of refer to that lovingly here as the gas pedal. We also have the parasympathetic, which is known as the rest, digest, grow, heal mode. Oftentimes it's easy to say, oh man, like sympathetic, I want to be out of sympathetic. But really, we should have a good balance between the two. If we need to go up a hill, sympathetic should activate to get us up there. Once we're up there, got to catch our breath. Parasympathetics help calm, help us breathe, all these sorts of things, right? So we should have a good balance between the two. We don't want to be stuck in one or the other. But when we're talking, and so the more stressors we experience, the more often and the earlier, the more we start to ramp up to where children, what we're finding, are oftentimes stuck in sympathetic dominance to the point that their parasympathetic nervous system, specifically the vagus nerve, which travels from the brainstem down the neck into the abdomen, controls so much of our digestion, of our automatic function, and is really a huge component of the parasympathetic rest digest portion of the nervous system. Oftentimes that part of the nervous system isn't even developed, again, because of how early these stressors really impacted them, right? So that's what we refer to as the gas pedal being stuck on, stress stuck on, being stuck in sympathetic dominance or overdrive. So some of the early signs when a kiddo is in that sympathetic dominant state chronically, not able to have good activation of the vagal tone, parasympathetic nervous system. I mentioned earlier with Mr. Miles, right? A stressed out, colicky baby, constipated, fussy, not able to calm, regulate, which, kiddos, babies at that age, they rely on mom to be calm and regulate, but in that exact same scenario I mentioned, if baby is just chronically upset and unwell, how calm, well-regulated, breathing, taking care of herself can mom really be, right? So that is where a component of taking care of the family really comes into place, right? But that's just one example of these early warning signs. As they grow up a little bit older, that can start to look as more of just constantly sick, challenging toddlers, chronic ear infections. Later on, that can develop into allergies, right? Asthma, where the body, again, is just stuck in a way where it's not able to properly adapt and respond to the to its environment. To its environment. That continues to get compounded, upon which that starts to lead to more sensory challenges, like I mentioned earlier, anxiety, overwhelm, both to their internal environment, much more to the external environment, because that just gets amplified on top of the noise of the internal environment. And speaking of noise, that's also where I like to share. So, not a kiddo, but I did have a patient recently who is an adult who struggles with schizophrenia. So, for those that don't know, schizophrenia is kind of where they're hearing chatter, noise, or voices internally in their heads. And I always found it remarkable how even the first time that I was working with him, he sat up on the table. You could just see this kind of wave of calm come in. He kind of took a deep breath for the first time in what seemed like a long time. And I asked him, and he confirmed that he says he felt like the noise was quieter, right? And so that's a perfect analogy to what we're talking about with these kiddos that are struggling. The internal noise is already so much, so loud, so overwhelming that exterior, be it lights, be it sounds, so you see them wearing headphones, earmuffs, or in their own world with music or different things like that they can control, smells, all these sorts of textures of clothing, right? All these sorts of things that become overwhelming, too much to handle because the internal noise, again, that sympathetic, that stress is just already so overwhelming. At any given point, our brain is able to perceive where our hands and our body, where our limbs, where all parts of our body are in space through the input of what's called proprioception, right? I can tell, even with my eyes closed, that my arm is out at 45 degrees, right arm out 45 degrees out from my body, with my eyes closed because of the proprioceptive input into the brain. When there's these areas where there's stuck tension, they're locked down, compressed, I mentioned torque, I mentioned counter torque. That's a significant degree of noise that happens because it shuts down that proprioceptive input, and it now becomes what's called nociception, which is that noxious input. That what we might kind of relate to as when we feel pain, it's a noxious input from heat going up into the brain, that the brain then perceives as, hey, that's a threat to my tissues. That is pain. That process is what's called nociception. So when we're talking about these kiddos that have all of these sensory challenges, we're talking about the noxious input, the noise being so high because their parasympathetic can never calm, I don't want to say shut that down, but just regulate that noise. Right? It's a different sort of input that gets to the brain that then creates a different or improper output in emotions, in behavior, in motor movement, development or coordination, in speech, cognition, right? Memory, all these sorts of things. So again, some other early signs there. So really, parents do have options. Oftentimes we're not aware of that, right? But nowadays, parents can go the traditional medicine route. Totally awesome. But we kind of know what we get with that. I mentioned earlier, ear infection, give them antibiotics. And a lot of times we're finding that parents more and more are trying to avoid until necessary medications, procedures, different things like that, right? So, but that's one option. Now more and more families are going more of the holistic route, functional medicine. Hey, let me actually get some blood work. Let me do some tests that really are giving me some information of what's lacking, what's deficient, things like that, right? But what I'm introducing here is that there's also a neurological component to where let's work at promoting health, calming or regulating their health and their well-being from the inside out. So rather than kind of giving something or intervention from the outside in, hoping they process and integrate that and express health outwardly. Let's work on addressing the internal nervous system, getting that calm, getting that regulated, so that they're better expressing health from the inside out, as health naturally develops. So one common question that we get at this point is like, why does this makes so much sense. Why have I never heard this before? And so really that's kind of what this video is expressing. Some of you may have seen this before. This is an awareness test.
How many passes?
So just pay attention to the team in white and count how many times the team in white passes the ball between one another.
The answer
Any
is
guesses?
13.
13, you got it right. Okay.
But
Aware.
you see the moonwalking bear.
The what?
Moonwalking
The
bear.
moonwalking bear. She's like, what? The what? So again, it goes back to what it said at the very end. It's easy to miss something that you're not looking for. If I don't have a tool, why would I even be looking for that problem? Right? And so whether we're talking about traditional medicine or pediatricians, we're talking about that functional medicine approach. If I don't have a test or anything to do with other than maybe supplements to really address the nervous system, why am I even going to talk about it, know about it, learn about it, teach about it, talk about it to my families, to my patients, to my community? So that was actually a cycling commercial about easy to be aware of what you're not looking for, right? But so in chiropractic school, we had a professor who would teach very complicated subjects, but in order to bring levity to the subject, he would break up the presentation into little moments of where he would just add something random. It would be a picture of him and with a camel in Egypt or something like that. So we're about to get into, a little bit more. So just wanted to break that up, pause, everybody take a breath, grab a sip of your drink. I should do the same. But this here is in India and a little tuk-tuk, again, driving around the city. I would like to say that, really it was all so cramped in there that I was sitting up front with the driver, but really if you're looking at our body position, like all dude is actually kind of sitting on my lap, right? So when awkward situations happen in India, how do you kind of overcome that? Just have fun, just laugh about it, take a picture, and let's move on. We'll get to our destination, right? So that's what that is. So really everything that we've talked about this evening can really all be surmised by this quote. This is a Harvard medical professor who was a tenured Harvard medical professor who walked away from his very well-established, lucrative, tenured career when he started to realize that there's more to what he was teaching his medical students. Harvard Medical School walked away from it. He is the one that coined this term that says the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment, internal and external, and coordinate the behavior of all of the cells, right? And so that's what we're talking about earlier today is perceiving internal noise, information, communication, perceiving the external environment, and adapting, coordinating accordingly, right?